Welcome back, everybody. You're watching Sport Federation TV. It's nice to have you along. And of course, we keep talking about sport in the Western Cape and various districts and the various sport codes, which of course are the official sport codes in South Africa and belong to SASCOC, our national body, and of course are recognized by sport structures, government structures in South Africa. Recently, last week in fact, Friday and Saturday, our national structure SASCOC hosted a safeguarding workshop where there were a number of guest speakers, in some cases international guest speakers, talking about the matter of safeguarding in sport in South Africa. And for those of you that are not aware, the SASCOC structures recently implemented the mandatory policy to have a safeguarding policy in place in sports federations in South Africa, and this is now not negotiable. But many of you will be asking, what is safeguarding? And many people will still be confused about the elements of safeguarding. And most importantly, many of you that are watching right now will wonder if you are in fact covered under the policy of safeguarding. Well, we are here to tell you that safeguarding is for everybody, and it is in fact primarily focused on the prevention of harassment and abuse. But to tell me more about that, in studio with me now is Sylvia Bruckner, the chairperson of the Western Cape Provincial Sport Confederation Safeguarding Commission. Sylvia, welcome back. Nice to have you in studio.
Thanks, JP.
Yeah, so the last time we had you in studio with us, we spoke about the fact that SASCOC had in fact put policy in place which all sport structures in South Africa now have to abide by.
So yes, indeed. The first thing we heard when we got to SASCOC was that there had been tremendous progress made in the last 18 months, and that all but 5 federations, so they probably represent over 80 different organizations, and only 5 of them have not got an adopted safeguarding policy in place. So we could say we're 95% compliant, I would say.
But am I correct? That is a fact now. SASCOC have got a policy in place and it's not negotiable. All federations must implement safeguarding in their structures.
Yes, an absolute directive by them as well.
Right. What does that mean? From a policy perspective, for folks that are watching, it maybe sounds a little bit technical. It sounds a little bit red tape-ish, so to speak. But SASCOC have already written a policy about, maybe just for the sake of clarity, just tell us, what is safeguarding?
Okay, well, safeguarding is a way to combat any kind of abuse that happens to athletes, and more particularly vulnerable athletes.
Yeah.
So that would typically be children, juniors, the youth, high-performance athletes that are still young, and then also people with disabilities, potentially people with different disabilities which would in fact make them vulnerable to predators.
Yeah, and there is still obviously a tremendous amount of education to do. Most athletes out there, I'm guessing, don't know that they have the right to be protected, and in some case maybe don't know when they are in fact being harassed or abused.
So in fact, that's one of the first things in the policy is that every athlete, every coach, every official, anybody involved with sport needs to be aware of what safeguarding is and what the safeguarding policy, what are the safeguarding principles.
Yeah. So SASCOC, of course, called the conference last week. It was a hybrid conference. Tell us a little bit more about that. It seemed like there was lots of aspects covered and lots of guests and certainly lots of expertise.
Yes. So they started off talking about leadership in sport and the leadership's role in terms of rolling out safeguarding policies. But then I think further than that now, how do you then make it real? How do you implement it? It's all very well having a policy in place, you've ticked the box, but how are you now going to make sure that those things that are in the policy are then implemented through all your structures, right down to club and individual athlete levels? Yeah.
It didn't start in South Africa though. It's been around. The International Olympic Committee, for example, has got some policies in place and some good programs in place.
Yes, indeed. And they also expect all international federations to have a policy in place as well.
Yeah, yeah. So they've got a structure called Athlete 365.
Yes.
That it looks like it's open for the public to go and read more and educate themselves.
So Athlete 365 is an attempt by the Olympics Committee to roll out all sorts of useful training to athletes and coaches. And so if you are an international athlete, you can actually enroll on their courses, and safeguarding is one of the topics that's extensively covered under their training programs.
So you mentioned something there interesting now that I want to ask you about. When we talk about safeguarding, is it primarily for coaches, or is it broader than that? Who is safeguarding targeting that needs to be certified, I suppose, if you will, because it seems to me that everybody's focusing on the coach, but surely there's more to it than that.
No, obviously athletes need to be aware, because if they're not aware of the safeguarding policies and understand that they are protected under those safeguarding policies, then the whole thing falls flat. So it's definitely aimed at the athletes, the coaches who probably have the most contact with the athletes, and then very importantly, all the officials. So the officials, any official at the events, but also officials within the federation structures and club structures.
So when you're talking about the officials, so in other words, if there's a competition or a tournament, officials is a broad range of people, from managers to scorers to timekeepers, coaches, physios. Does it encompass all of that?
Everyone.
Everyone.
Yes.
How does that work, though?
So I mean, one would even argue, and this is what's one of the topics that we're talking about, is very often you have subcontractors at an event,
Right.
people that do the catering and so on.
Yeah.
So although what needs to, as practical as possible, make everybody aware that is at those events in any kind of organization or participation role.
So do you think it's a good idea then, if there's an event of sort, that the event organizers certify everybody who's participating, that there's some sort of vetting of the security, the catering and so on?
Well, it's important anybody that is employed or is involved or volunteers at these events should be cleared and should be notified of what they may or may not do.
So from a more immediate understanding perspective, a team that is traveling, so there's a number of athletes that have been selected and traveling. What are the kind of things that should happen for a team like that when one asks the basic question, have you taken care of safeguarding for this team to travel?
So every code might be different, but in general, I would say that you would need to make sure that any coach, any manager, and any chaperones are cleared through a vetting process.
Right.
That should be contained in your policies so that nobody can refuse, so that you have the right to do that. But you should then ensure that there are background checks and criminal checks and all the other registers that are available. People should be checked against those to make sure that they're in fact safe to accompany the team.
Okay, so we're going to carry on talking about this, folks, after the break. So make sure you don't go anywhere, because there's quite a lot involved here, and we will, of course, do regular discussions around safeguarding on the show, so you are more familiar with how it needs to happen at ground level, club level, federation level, eventing level, etc. So don't go away. We're going to be back after the break, and we carry on talking to Sylvia about safeguarding in sport in South Africa. We'll be back in a sec.